Hello and welcome to LA Currents. I'm Anita Bennett. Well, election season is right around the corner, and this year, age is a key factor among voters. So how old is too old to run, or is it even ageist to ask? Joining us to discuss the issue is longtime Los Angeles activist and writer, and you are also a political analyst, Earl Ofari Hutchinson. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So you've written a book about this issue. It is called, Is Biden Really Too Old? The Politics of Age and Ageism in America. What prompted you to write this?
Well, actually, the subtitle kind of tips it. The politics, not just the age and ageism, the politics of age and ageism. What I was struck by is this presidential election, 2024. Now, typically when you look at, and I've been following presidential elections and politics for more than a half a century, at the risk of dating myself and aging myself, but that's okay. Never have I ever seen during the whole political process, especially at that level, age become an issue.
Oh.
Why all of a sudden now age and ageism? I think the key to understand this is two things. One, the ISM, not just aging, but the ism. Mm-hmm. When you really look at aging in America, there's a stigma attached to it. You know, we think about racism, sexism, genderism, all of these other isms. But ageism in the pecking order is something that really is out of sight, out of mind. But nonetheless, think of all the stereotypes about senior citizens, mature adults. I mean, they're endless.
Exactly.
All right, now, when that's interjecting into politics, we have now a whole new dimension to it. Now it's become an issue. It's become a political issue. And you asked the question starting out, how old is too old?
Yeah.
Well, it could be anything. We know, and scientists have proven this in many, many ways, and there have been a number of studies and surveys, 80 today, if someone genetically fine, exercises, watches their diet, is in fairly good health.
It's not like the 80 of 30, 40 years ago.
No. The new age now could be 60, 65, maybe even younger. Chronological age is not the same as biological age. Conversely, somebody could be 19 if they're in poor health.
But why are people so concerned this election season?
They're concerned because they have bought into, back to my original point, many of the stereotypes about aging, even though they're outdated. So for example, let's go through the litany. You forget, you can't remember, you stumble over things, you can't walk straight, you can't write straight, you can't remember your name, you can't remember anything. you have a cognitive, I love this term, cognitive decline with aging, not to mention a physical decline. So now we come to Joe Biden. What do we hear over and over and over? One of the major political hit points against him by Trump, the GOP, and critics, and a wide body of the general public. The guy's too old. The guy has cognitive decline. If he makes a little flub, it's national news.
He has a stutter.
If he's, well, and you know, that's an issue that's been there.
Yeah.
And God forbid, don't let him stumble. If you stumble when you're walking, if you're a little shaky, right away, you see, we've told you, he's not fit to be the commander-in-chief. He's not fit to sit in the White House.
Is that just a talking point?
It's a talking point because it's been made a talking point by, needless to say, the GOP. I mean, that's been a strong point they've been pounding him on. Then you've got conservative bloggers, conservative media. That's been out there and been put out there in the general public. So after a while, it has a life unto its own.
Yeah.
Every poll I have seen, this is one of the things that really caught my attention and said, you know what, I think there's a book here. Every poll and survey I've seen has shown one thing across the board, almost uniformly. The majority of those of any age group, including many senior citizens, say there should be a cutoff in terms of age when someone can hold a political office.
How do you determine that?
You can't. It's like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder. But now it's in the eye of whoever's saying that politically. Do you have a political agenda? Do you have a political axe to grind? Or if not, Have you just bought into a lot of the mythology about aging?
Yeah.
I think that's what we're seeing now with the political process in Biden.
And it's not just the presidential contenders. It's also, we ran into this issue with Senator Dianne Feinstein before she passed away.
Right.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I mean, and now there's even talk about Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor that she has some health problems and maybe she should step down. And then there was Mitch McConnell. So it's a big issue in Washington.
Well, and that's why I say it's developed a life of its own. And my guess is as we go forward, we're still 5 months out before November. At this point in time, as we go forward, it's going to be more and more of an issue. So, for example, there's not a day that goes by when you don't see watchers looking at Biden and reporting, we caught him where he stumbled in his presentation, or we caught him where he stuttered, or we caught him where he got a date mixed up. So you're going to see all of that, and it's just buried in people's mind, the guy's too old. He's not going to be able to make, critical decisions, foreign policy decisions, life and death decisions. Is that true? Of course it's not true. It doesn't make any difference how many coherent speeches that Biden makes. His State of the Union was acknowledged by even some of the partisans on the other side. For 45, 50 minutes, almost, it was pretty coherent, pretty strong, pretty straightforward, even in the attack mode. But still, it didn't take the issue off the table. Is he too old?
It wasn't enough to quiet the critics.
No, and it's not going to be.
So when we see, and I'm not disparaging Senator Feinstein, but when we see these people, and Mitch McConnell with his brain freezes, holding on to power, why is that? Why, most people, they look forward to retiring at 65 or 68. Why do these people stay?
Well, the key word is power. I got power. Nobody. It's like old fighters. They always have to make a comeback. They're getting beat all over the ring, but it doesn't matter. The cameras, the lights, the adulation, the glamour. My name is in the lights. I'm in the press. People want me. I'm not a nobody anymore. When I go down the street, they ask for my autograph. Well, now we transfer that to politics. Mitch McConnell, I think it's fair to say, had a lot of power. He controls a big part of how government is shaped in this country. Even it was certainly the Supreme Court. You're talking about law and public policy. That's profound. Who really wants to give that up? How many leaders, when you look throughout history, let's take it out of this context for a minute. Throughout history, if they've had a presidency, a dictatorship, how many of them have voluntarily stepped down?
That's a good point.
It just doesn't work that way. Rarely does that happen. So we come back to the issue, the power equation. I'm just thinking about Ginsburg now. They were pounding on her. Your late 80s, you've had all of these health challenges, the cancer and all of that. You're going to give the GOP a chance now to put somebody in there, step down while we still have Obama in the White House, and he can make the appointment. She still refused to do that. Now, this is not, a criticism. It's just an example of how people, no matter what, they will not give up power in that position. Now, the other thing, as a result of that, we do have term limits. So at the state level and the local level, term limits was partly put in because sometimes you stay too long. Younger, fresher, new ideas, new blood. Maybe yes, maybe no. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Because there's something else we have to remember about the aging process. There's another little word sometimes we forget, experience.
Yeah, we'll come back to experience, but I want to ask you about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Sonia Sotomayor. Should we ask to see these people's medical records?
Yeah.
Or is that asking too much?
Well, in the case of Sotomayor, we have a problem here. Beyond just our discussion about age and aging and power and all of that, Now you have to look at the Supreme Court. Think about that for a second. She is, by all standards, the liberal/moderate bloc on the Supreme Court. Ginsburg, very liberal on the Supreme Court. You take them out of the equation, what do you have now? So you already have an ultra-conservative Supreme Court. So you're going to load it up even more? Now remember,
but I think the criticism was, the critics are calling for her to step down so that Biden can appoint someone in the event that he is not reelected.
Right.
And Trump won't get that opportunity.
So they're trying to draw a parallel between Obama and Ginsburg because he was on his way out too at that point. He only had one more year or year and a half. And it's a compelling argument. It is a compelling argument because at this point in time, we don't know how the election's going to go.
Yeah.
We do not know that. Trump may win. I mean, let's just be brutally frank. He may win, despite everything. If that happens, and he's already made clear, the Supreme Court is going to look like me. You're going to have 9 Alitos, 9 Clarence Thomases, 9 John Roberts on there, 9 Coney Barrett on there, Kavanaugh. Where does it end? Do you want that? So there's a lot of pressure on Biden, and there's a lot of pressure on her, Sotomayor. But my guess is at this point in time, she, it's not like she's doddering and tottering and all of that. She's still got her faculties, so she'll probably stay. Okay. Gambling on that Biden will be reelected.
You mentioned experience. Experience certainly is a key thing in terms of going in, knowing the players, knowing the issues, knowing how to get things done. But a lot of people don't value experience. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's a double-edged sword. Everything you just said, the checklist, knowing how to, dot the I's and cross the T's, the whole legislative process, all the contacts that are made over time, and how the process works, and being adept at using that for your constituents. That's all important. That comes with experience. It just doesn't fall magically from the sky. So that's a plus. That's an argument for the experience. The argument against it is if someone is not fit physically and or mentally, really serious issues, and you can see it, then at that point in time, experience is not going to cancel that out.
Do we need term limits on Capitol Hill? Is that the solution?
Ironically, do you know who supported term limits on Capitol Hill? Mitch McConnell.
Oh, that's
Mitch
interesting.
McConnell
that is interesting.
Mitch McConnell actually backed term limits, not once, but twice. Now, he already knew, being very clever and crafty, he knew it wasn't going anywhere. So it was no real anything sweat off of him to do it. But I think there is value there if there's a mentoring process. In other words, before somebody steps into that office, it's almost like politics 101, mentoring 101, maybe 102 and 3. Grill them in the process, ground them in the process. I think there's an arguable point to have younger, more vibrant individuals, not just because of youth and age. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about new ideas.
Yeah.
New energy. That's what I'm talking about. Almost of any age, I think that's important. And by the way, when I say term limit,
but some people say not too young.
Well, no. Well, people are going to say that. But then again, now we get into another issue. What's too young?
Well, that's a good point.
What's too young? The founding fathers in the Constitution, remember, they only put age on one thing, the presidency, 35. There's no age on anything else anywhere in the Constitution. And speaking of aging, I think we'd be a little remiss if we didn't add one other point. While we're talking about Biden, because that's how the issue came up, the last time I looked, Trump wasn't, he wasn't exactly 19 in the spring chicken either.
Yeah, he's up there too.
Yeah.
But in the book, you talk about other presidents. There were concerns raised about their health, like Ronald Reagan.
That's right.
So tell us a little bit about that.
All right, Reagan all the time got pounded on one thing. He forgets. He's got Nancy over here helping him. He can't get a line straight. If the teleprompter, he's an ex-actor. He knows how to read lines. Mm-hmm. If the teleprompter isn't there, Ronald Reagan was hopeless. He got pounded on that. They had a number of medical tests. They found nothing. Also, Bush, to an extent, kind of got that too.
The first or the second?
Well, actually, both of them got that. But, not like Reagan. But really where it came in, John McCain.
Yeah.
Senator McCain, they pounded on him there too because, well, he did obviously have challenges with the cancer. But they also said with the age thing too, Obama made it clear, I'm not going there with that. That is not where I'm going with that. Others did, but he didn't. So we're going to keep the campaign strictly focused on one thing, issues. Nothing more, nothing less, which is the correct thing to do.
Will we see any resolutions on this issue?
As long as Biden is the president, as long as Biden is up for a second term, it's always going to be an issue. As a matter of fact, I'll even go a step further. Even if Biden wins, it probably will even be more of an issue. Do you think they're going to stop watching him? You think they're going to stop talking about that? When I say they, I mean the GOP, conservatives, them.
Critics.
Because let's face it, there's still a powerhouse in this country, up and down, state, local, national, you name it. So I think it will be an issue for a long time to come. The bigger issue is, and the bigger concern is, will we ever grapple with the issue of ageism?
Yes.
Not just embodied in one person in one campaign, but the concept of ageism. Can we get away from that? Mm-hmm. What do we see even now as we sit here and talk in advertising? Typically when they talk about senior citizens.
Well, in advertisers, the coveted demo is 18 to 49-year-olds. So you're absolutely right. I mean, we see people over and over saying, older people, when they lose a job, they can't get a new job. So it kind of permeates society.
Well, and also too, when you look at all the advertising in AARP in their journal, in the back, what do you see? Your bathtub, guarded, your wheelchair, your walker. These are all the things
the first alert thing
the
where
first
if I
remote,
can't get up.
and God forbid the hearing. You got all kind of devices. So it sends, well, really, I was going to say a subtle message. That ain't too subtle.
All right, we
Now
have.
remember, this is the AARP.
Yeah.
Not Teen Vogue.
We've discussed quite a bit about this issue, but you've written more than a dozen books, and you've written a lot about race and other issues. But let's first talk about these protests happening on college campuses, because you were just out at USC.
Right.
So what was the message you were trying to convey?
Well, there were a couple of things. A little context. When you talk about USC, now you got UCLA and dozens of other universities around the country. The Gaza protests, students, the encampments, demonstrations, protests, but I think most importantly, the confrontations and the violence. That was the problem. So over at USC, I had two concerns. One, because we've had family members, relatives, and I was part of the commencement at one point with one of my daughters who graduated from USC. So, I was concerned about canceling the commencement. What kind of precedent did that set? Because you and I know, and anybody that's living and breathing knows, there's always going to be issues.
Yes.
There's always going to be confrontation. There's always going to be conflict. That's the world we live in. So every time something happens, you're going to circle the wagons and overreact. That was one issue I had. The other issue, but the major one that brought me there, is have a dialogue with the different groups, because you've already had a lot of conflict. You had the LAPD come in, you've had, arrests, you've had everything, disruption. It's not going to go away. So get out in front, which you should have done in the beginning. Get out in front on that and stay out front. By you, I mean the administration.
Okay, that was my question. Were you talking about the students or the administrators?
No, the president and the administration.
What did you hear from the students while you were there?
Well, it wasn't so much the students, it was the administration. My aim wasn't there, and that wasn't my target.
But I did see you on the news, and there were students
Well, I can tell you
around.
what happened. By meeting with them, you're not going to necessarily change minds. You're not going to do that. I mean, students feel very passionate about this.
Yes.
They do. You're not going to convince anybody, but what you can do is by going face to face, by having a visible presence, namely you being there, you can diffuse any potential for violence in the future. That was really the message, partly. The other part to that is set a good model for other college presidents. You've had, for example, my other daughter just sent me a text today. She teaches at Pitzer. out at Claremont. She said the administration there will not meet with the students. Bad idea. Bad idea. UCLA, no, bad idea.
But isn't that's typical? I mean, I graduated from Howard University in DC, and I remember when I was there, students were protesting, you know, there were roaches in some of the dorms, students were protesting the conditions. And I don't recall the administration meeting with student protest leaders.
Yeah, but why not? The fact is, they are students. And then remember, there's something else, whether it's Howard University or USC. These are not universities, colleges that are on the far side of the moon. People forget, they're right in the community. Yeah. There's a community tie too. These are public institutions to an extent. I know private, but there's public money that comes in. So a part of that, there is a public component. So I think there's a duty and an obligation to at least have some outreach, make some attempt. Now, if you're rebuffed, that's another matter. But keep trying. What do you got to lose?
How is the student movement of today different from, say, during the Vietnam War?
You know, that's an interesting question because that's my generation. Yeah. I mean, we were students then. I think then, as I can recall it, and this is not aging here, this is what I recall, the fact is they were much more confrontational.
Back then?
Yeah, back then. Much more. I mean, much more driven then. And they were massive then, as I recall. Massive demonstration, up to and including, I have to jog people's memory on that, they shut universities and campuses down then. I mean, it was that heavy duty, because you got to remember the period. We're coming out of the 60s and into the early 70s. So they were massive. Remember Kent State, the violence. Remember Jackson State, Orangeburg. You had shootings. I mean, you had deaths. So it was a little bit different then. Yeah. Why? Because the times were different.
Yeah. We are more, I hate to use this word, but more woke today.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about, you've written a lot of books on race. Race in Los Angeles. What are you hearing in the community since we had that racist recording involving some city council members? What's the status of race in LA right now?
That's a good question. Because some might say it's always changing. Some others might say it looks the same to me. Well, when you really look at LA, it's a polyglot city. I mean, you got everybody from everywhere under the sun that has come to the city. You got every kind of community under the sun here. By that I mean every ethnicity,
yes,
every nationality, every country grouping is in LA. So right away, it's not a melting pot in the sense of everybody's blending together, but I think it is such a diverse community, wide community, big city, big communities, diversity. That leads to two things. One, the potential for problems, conflict, misunderstanding, which is conflict. And the second thing is a big challenge for political officials, public officials, both local, well, especially local, statewide, but especially local. I've always felt that you need to have a broader board of supervisors and a broader city council to deal with all of the different ethnicities, neighborhoods, nationalities. In other words, expanded.
Define broader. More?
More. You need more. Think about it. You got one supervisor that represents an area which is almost as big in some places as many countries, millions of people. So I think, you need to have more of a diverse representation. I think you need to rethink the political process, how it is, because it's been in place so long. It's been frozen. One of the areas that has been somewhat problematic when you talk about race in LA, Black, African American, and Hispanic. And before that, African American and Asian American, more specifically Korean. I haven't really seen the flashpoints that we had a few years ago, between these communities. And I tell people when this question comes up, when you go to a lot of communities like South LA, it's Black and Hispanic, but now predominantly Hispanic. You got people live side by side. They go to school. They go to the markets. They go to the parks. So you're not finding people constantly in conflict with each other. And by the way, that's a good thing. Yeah, you got gang activity. Yeah, you have some violence. Yeah, you have hate crimes, but you're going to have that anyway. But I don't just see the city being overwhelmed with that. So what I'm trying to say is I'm always trying to spin it in a positive light.
So what you're saying is the state of race in LA is pretty good.
I think at this point in time, given the nature of this city, it's about as good or the best that we can hope for. Can there be improvement? Of course. It takes a lot of hard work. There are a lot of community organizations that believe in multiculturalism, that believe in cooperation across the lines. There are a lot of individuals that do that. There are a lot of faith groups in LA that do that. And some elected officials, have been working. All the elected officials all say we got to work together. Some more than others in terms of actually in the trenches and doing that and making that happen. But I think the trends are a good trend going forward. As long as people forget one thing, it's easier to work together than work against.
Oh, that's well said. Easier to work together than work against. We are almost out of time, but I need to ask about the key issue in Los Angeles, homelessness.
Oh.
What are you hearing in the community? Are people noticing improvements? Because that's been a key factor, a key issue with Mayor Bass.
Right. Well, yeah, and it would have to be. You can't be the mayor of this city or an elected official and be an ostrich with your head in the sand. That's got to be the number one issue. Why? Number one, LA is a homelessness capital of the United States. Some might even say almost the world, but definitely we'll keep it here. So that's number one. Secondly, you got to grapple with the problem because it's a quality of life problem. Across the board, it affects everything and affects everybody. My big concern is this. There's been a lot of money, as we know, that's been poured into trying to solve the homeless issue / problem. And as you know, there have been concerns about how effective the spending is when we're seeing even more homelessness on the streets than ever. So I think that's a major challenge for public officials. If you're going to ask the public to be generous with the purse strings, spend money, make sure it's allocated properly and make sure it's being spent effectively.
What else are people saying? Are they saying, I'm seeing more, it's getting worse?
Everybody's saying that. Everybody's saying, it's a terrible thing. Well, partly that and partly because it's been there so long. It's almost like I can walk down the street and see 10,000 encampments and I don't even notice it. Out of sight, out of mind.
Well, the Olympics are coming to LA in a few years, and do you think, put on your crystal ball, do you think that we will see more progress before then?
I think we will. Partly because, remember, you always want, when the Olympics come to a city, any city, you clean it up. You want to make it a showpiece. You have to do that because the whole world is coming here. So you always want to put your best face forward. No one wants to look ugly to the world. And it's Los Angeles. It has a reputation. So I think in part a lot of money will be spent. A lot of cleanup will be spent. A lot of outreach will be spent. A lot of public relations will be done to show the world how great a city LA is. Some of it is puff, some of it is nonsense, but some of it is reality.
All right, well, Earl Ofari Hutchinson, political analyst, author, and activist, thank you so much for coming in.
My pleasure.
All right, and that is going to do it for this edition of LA Currents. I'm Anita Bennett. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.